We are very lucky because the IOC is among us, the Chief Project also. So please make an applause for Marie Sallois and Matthieu Auzanneau. How are you doing? So thank you very much for being there with us. We will begin by you, Marie. Thank you very much to be there with us today. The first question that I have for you, Marie, as a catalyst for change and innovation, how does the IOC try to gather all the stakeholders to fit with the Paris Agreement? How do you do to gather everyone to try to tackle and answer this issue?
D'abord, bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. Do you feel the Olympic spirit? After having heard from all these Olympians, how many of you have watched the Olympic Games?
Wow, I think everyone.
How many of you remember that this very venue was a venue for the Olympic and Paralympic Games Paris 2024? What sport was practiced here? Do you remember? Fencing, yes. And what else? Taekwondo. Do you remember the Olympians coming down this very staircase on both sides where actually you are sitting just before their competition? And the fact that where we stand was actually where they were competing? Do you remember what you just heard earlier? That you watched amazing athletes. I mean, we had amazing emotions of seeing them in the field of play, competing at their best. But what did you see apart from that? You saw people from 206 territories, including Afghan athletes. You saw as many women fighting and winning as men for the first time because they were the first parity games. And you saw also the refugee team that we heard earlier. So what you saw was sport at its best, but also humanity at its best. And I think this is important before we talk about decarbonization, because the Olympic Games are about sport, but more than sport. Let's not forget we are about building a better world for over 100 years. So why does it matter? As we celebrate and we take stock of the legacy of the Paris Agreement, we also take stock of 10 years of a transformation journey that we started in 2015, when we launched Olympic Agenda, a roadmap for change. We also celebrate 10 years of recognition of sport being an enabler for sustainable development. So for us, it's very important because since 2015, we have really elevated sustainability, decarbonization, climate action as a strategic priority. And this was done as a result of a consultation process throughout the Olympic movement, but also with all the stakeholders. So what did we commit to in 2015? And why are we happy to be with you today to actually present the results of this journey? We commit to put sustainability at the very heart of our decision-making process. We committed to align with the Paris Agreement, and in everything we were doing, to reduce the footprint to really the maximum and maximize the positive impact. So that's the commitment we made 10 years ago, and we are very happy to stand in front of you to actually report on these results, knowing that Paris 2024, that you all watched, was the first edition to fully benefit from this agenda of change from start to finish. And it was a way for us to demonstrate that, yes, you can cut by half the carbon footprint of the Games.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for that. Do you know that in the sport industry, we have a lot of very interesting think tanks, like the think tank Sport and Citizenship. We have also another one. Who knows the think tank, the Shift Project? Who knows the Shift Project here? Okay. So Matthieu, you know the Shift Project, I think. So you are the director, the executive director. Can you maybe share what is the think tank and also speak about one of your latest reports around decarbonization of the sport industry?
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for inviting us to share this report that we did on the carbon footprint of sports in France. The Shift Project, a few words about it. It's a non-for-profit organization, a think tank, probably, arguably, the most influential in France when it comes to decarbonization. And we published a couple of months ago, a study of the carbon footprint of specifically football and rugby in France, with analog results for any kind of amateur or professional sport. And the main result boils down to this. It's going to be hard to decarbonize sports, whether it's football, rugby, you name it, if we don't cope with the use of oil for transports. Basically, half of the carbon footprint of sports comes from transportation. That's no surprise, but that's huge, and that's the most complicated part to deal with. It's roughly half of the footprint. When you focus on professional sports, this share of transportations goes up to 80%. The more you regard, obviously, international events, the more this share of petroleum for transportation overweights the carbon footprint. For instance, an international game, an international match can have 40 to 50 times more carbon emission than a domestic professional sport in France. So that's half or even more of the footprint that comes from transportation. And then you have 20% that comes from gears, equipment, with the problem that there's a very short lifespan for many equipments that are produced from petroleum. To give you an example, in France we are 60 million people. There are 60 million inhabitants in France. Most of them are not don't play football or don't play rugby. So 60 million inhabitants in France, 80 million sports equipment sold every year in France. So that's huge, and that's a large part of the footprint, 20% of the carbon footprint of sports. Okay. So when you have transportation, equipment, and then also infrastructures, you have let's say 80 to 90% of the carbon footprints of sports. Okay. In the example that we focus on, that is rugby and football in France, but you can have the same shares for any kind of sports when you have a lot of equipment changed very frequently, and a large part of the transportation that relies on petroleum. Okay.
Thank you, Matthieu. And you can read this report. It's very interesting, done by the Shift Project. To come back to you, Marie, the IOC has pledged to align with the Paris Agreement. Can you share some concrete action and project that reflect this commitment within the IOC?
Yes, thank you. When we pledged this commitment, we knew from the beginning that we had to do that across the three spheres of responsibility that we have. So as an organization, the IOC, as the leader of the Olympic movement, with a few hundred people we are, as owner of the Games, which is a most visible platform and we have the most impact, and as leader of the Olympic movement. So we committed to take action in these three spheres. So starting with the IOC, because we have to lead by example. We are rather small, but it was important for us to be, the leader and to be a role model. So what did we do? We are a global organization. we have a lot of carbon emissions coming from transportation as well. And we decided to reduce for a first step, by 30% of carbon emissions for this Olympiad, 21-24, compared to the last one. Obviously, we didn't count 2020 because of COVID. And what we did is we introduced carbon budget for each entity of the IOC. So it means that they have a financial budget, an HR budget, and they have a carbon budget, and we treat carbon as a scarce resource. And we empower the managers to make the decision they want as part of this budget. As a result of that, we have indeed more than reduced by 30% our carbon emissions, and we are on our way to reduce by 50 by 2030. That's for the organization. When it comes to the games, as we discussed earlier, Paris 2024 reduced by half the carbon footprint compared to the 2 previous editions, London and Rio. And how did they achieve that? It was the result of a co-creation together and a journey of 10 years. We completely changed the way we engage with the host. Now, we really, instead of in the past, we were asking the host how they could deliver the games. Now the question is more, okay, what can the games do for the host? And how they can accelerate the sustainable development of the host territory. Therefore, we discussed how Paris and the region of Paris, and more generally France, can leveraging the existing infrastructure or build only temporary ones, and to reduce the footprint. And this is what was done. I mean, you all watched the games, and you saw that Paris was turned into a playground, the whole city. This building, but also the Seine, into a swimming pool, the feet of the Eiffel Tower in the beach volley arena. So we took advantage of everything that was existing, and the only very small venue that were built was the aquatic center and the villages in Saint-Denis, where we needed this infrastructure. So this helped reduce drastically the footprint, but obviously there were many more measures like renting instead of buying, using renewable energy, and so on. So we reduced the footprint of the games, and we demonstrated it was feasible. And last but not least, we are active everywhere in the world, across the 206 territories and dozens of federations. And how can you engage this vast movement that is financed, by the way, by the revenue from the games? We invest $4.7 million every day in sport worldwide. So how can you engage this very organization? They are very small sometimes. Sometimes there are 3 volunteers. So how do you do that? And for that, we created with UN Climate in 2018 a platform for action, Sport for Climate, which support this organization. And 300 of them have joined forces and committed to the Paris Agreement as we speak. And we are monitoring their progress. So we can say we have been working on the IOC, on the Games, and on the Olympic movement, and we are well underway to meet our commitments by 2030.
Thank you, Marie. Very, very interesting also to have this insight. The sport, as you know, has a power to inspire. There is some initiative, very interesting. I don't know if you know the Sport Sponsors Climate Pledge launched by the ChangeNOW and 17 Sport a few years ago. The French Professional League is also putting some licensed club points to linked sports and sustainability. I have a question for you, Matthieu. Finally, why is it not so long, but what can we do to accelerate the sustainable transformation of the sport industry? What can we do? Because there is a lot of initiative, but it's still not going so quickly.
Like I said, a very large part of the carbon footprint of a sport event comes from transportation. So obviously, when you deal with short distance, you can use public transportation. You can use couches instead of individual cars. You can promote the tools, the many tools that helps you to avoid using individual cars and flights. So the reports that we did that only deals with rugby and sports, and football and sports in France shows that roughly for 90% of the travelers, there are solutions. If you have a bold policy to promote public transportation, instead of using individual cars, and when possible, use train instead of plane. It's way more difficult when you deal with international competitions. But even in this with this scope, there are solutions. For instance, we did a study regarding the Olympics, and obviously they are, when it comes to the way that infrastructure were used, like you said, it's a very interesting progress that was unfolded for this Olympiad. But we believe that we could continue to progress by developing fan zones, not in France, but all over the world, to help give incentive not to take planes to come to France for some of the spectators that are interested in this kind of solutions. And we believe that that would be an interesting way to route the event, this international event, in each country that takes part of the to the competition, not by inciting people from, I don't know, Latin America or Asia to come to Paris this year, but to stay in their country and to use fan zones that could give the vibe of the event in their domestic country. That's the kind of solution that we would like to promote.
Thank you, Matthieu. Marie, I know that you want to answer Matthieu, but I have a question for you. What gives you hope for the world ecosystem, for the world of sport? What gives you hope that the sport can fit with the Paris Agreement? You were also speaking about an athlete initiative that you have. Can you very quickly answer to Matthieu and share your answer?
Yeah, not just to follow on Matthieu. I mean, you were watching the games and you were part of the 5 billion, and I say billions, of people watching the games. Out of these 5 billion people, only a few million came on site, and out of these 4 million, we had 8% that represented 80% of the emissions.
It's the hugest part. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is the hugest part, and this is a population we need to work on for the future. But more generally, why I am confident in the future? First, because yes, it took us 10 years to get where we are, but we demonstrated already with Paris, the first edition of this agenda, that we could make progress, and tremendous progress in 10 years. Second, I believe we will continue to be made accountable by our stakeholders, our audience, but also our athletes. I mean, a few years back, prior to the COP, right after Tokyo 2020, 50 athletes came to us and said, we want to be part of this journey and we want to work alongside you. Recently, 400 athletes wrote to the future president to say, we want to be part of the journey and we want you to continue to accelerate the pace. So the athletes being at the heart of the movement, as you heard earlier, very committed themselves. I'm very confident that they can support and help us sustain the momentum.
Thank you very much.
Let's continue the journey.
Thank you, Marie. And Matthieu, an infinite growth in a finite world is impossible.
You said it.
Yeah. What is your hope for the sport ecosystem? Do you have a vision? What is your
when we discuss energy transition, usually we stop with electricity. Sometimes we talk about energy, but we seldom talk about how energy is used. And actually, you can figure the issue this way. Energy is like the lifeblood, is like blood in our organism. When you, for instance, that's the case for sports, but that's the case for any sector that uses energy. You have to face the fact that it's going to be very complicated to keep the same level of consumption without petroleum or fossil fuels. Therefore, you have to, at a certain stage, you have to transform, you have to modify the way the energy is used. That's why we say you have to focus on, at a certain stage, you have to focus on solutions that make you avoid plane travels, for instance. There is no way that we can decarbonize the economy without reducing, collectively, reduce the energy that we need to make our system work. There is no way, because fossil fuels are the most abundant, the easiest form of energy, and that's the only reason why it's still so huge in the worldwide energy mix.
Thank you very much, Matthieu. You can upload these two persons with us, inspiring guests. Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, Matthieu. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.